Clustered into a cuddle huddle, still and secret, 3 little leverets hide out in the field.
All snuggled, cosy, and oh so adorable. There were 3 in the bed, and the little one said, "Budge up a bit, 'cause it's time for Springwatch."
Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2021, coming to you live from Wild Ken Hill on the northwest coast of Norfolk. What a fantastic spot and a significant change in the...
I'll tell you, Chris, you know me, I'm a very positive, cheerful person, but I've got to be honest, the last couple of days I have been moaning just a little bit. What about, well, of course, the weather and the fact that it's been so wet. But as Chris said, we woke up this morning, the sun was shining, and just look at this. Blue sky. It's put a smile on everybody's face.
Not just everyone's face, but also some of the animals that are here as well, because they are enjoying a little bit of respite from the rain. Here are live nests that we've got there, a great range of species. We're constantly adding to those, but I want to return to one of my favourites, top right-hand corner, the swallow, looking resplendent in the evening light there. Let's have a look at that. There's the top shot looking down. Can't see whether that's the male or the female. They've got 3 chicks in that nest that they're brooding and feeding as much as they can at the moment. In fact, swallows are quite popular with our viewers. Barbara Cull has asked on Facebook, where do the swallows get the white feathers from that they've used to line their nest? Well, Barbara, I've got to tell you, they get them by catching them in the air. And I've actually seen it myself, a wood pigeon flying over, molting a feather like this, which then drifted like that, and was dexterously caught by the swallow and took it back to its nest. So that's how they get them. They don't land on the ground to pick them up, they catch them in the air. But what's interesting is that a 2010 study in Denmark showed that the swallows were choosing very particular feathers. Now look at the nest here. The majority of those feathers are white. So when you said the white feathers in the nest, those are being actively chosen by the swallows. They will put brown ones in, but they prefer the white ones if they can get them. Now, the scientist who published this in the Journal of the Linnaean Society wondered why they were going for the white feathers, and they've come up with a couple of theories. Firstly, it could be that they are enhancing the thermoregulatory properties of the nest. They could be keeping those young birds slightly warmer, with the exception of the fact that they noticed that if there were more of the white feathers in the nest whilst the swallows were laying their clutch, a greater number of those eggs hatched. And furthermore, there's also some thought that the feathers might carry bacteria which might positively influence the incubating eggs themselves by reducing the impact of certain other bacteria on the developing embryos, and that would mean that more of those eggs would hatch. So they actively choose the white feathers, and the white feathers have a positive benefit to hatching those eggs and the chicks surviving in the nest. Now, you really couldn't make that up, and although it's early in the programme, I'm going to say that's what you pay your licence fee for. What a gem of science that is.
Do you know, it's absolutely remarkable, and what I do find remarkable is that someone has taken the time to study that and find that bit of scientific information out. It's extraordinary. Let's have another look at our selection of live nests, because we've introduced you to quite a few of them already, but there's a couple that we still haven't, and one of those is this one. Now, what nest is this? You can't really see what it is until we zoom into it, and I can tell you that it's the nest of a grey partridge. Different to a red-legged partridge, they don't have red legs for a start, they have a wonderful orange bit of facial hair, well, feathers. Really gorgeous bird. Lucky to see it though, because they've declined by 91%. It's a massive decline since 1967. Look, you can see it's all puffed up there. Good reason, because it holds the record for having the largest clutch of any bird in the UK. Anything between 9 and 20 eggs. Imagine that, Chris, sitting on 20 eggs. This one we think is sitting on 18. So there's going to be a lot of little grey partridge chicks, and once they hatch they're precocial, so they'll be up and they'll be out. So we really need to keep our eye on that nest because we won't be seeing the chicks for long and we're not sure when they're going to hatch.
Got a question for you.
Go on.
Sometimes you like to name the animals
I
that
do.
we feature. Okay, so if you were going to name this partridge, what would you call it? Think, hold on, think before you answer.
Okay.
Think about where we are.
Okay. Ken.
Ken.
Wild Ken Hill. Ken.
No, not Ken. We're in Norfolk, aren't we? We're in Norfolk. A partridge in Norfolk. Aha! Knowing me, knowing you. Aha! Alan Partridge, very obviously. My goodness me. Well, look, let's move swiftly on. Clearly, my colleague here hasn't got a pulse on the humour of the British people, but let's move swiftly on because you've been out and about looking for those animals which are featured on our watch list. Now, if you go to the website, we put a series of challenges there for you, species that we'd like you to look out for. Some are easy, some a bit more difficult, some very hard. What about this one? This one has been sent in by Rob Davies, a couple of fine-looking starlings there in the garden, gobbling down some mealworms, which I've no doubt Rob has put out for them.
Common tern is next, and that's from Jack Simmons. I'm not sure about this though, Chris, because it does say on the watch list that the tern has to either be catching fish or calling. What do you reckon?
Well, I think you're being quite harsh.
Okay, we'll give it a tick. We'll give it a, it is a good photo.
Hey, what about this one? A bumblebee here, taken by Jason Mules in Tavistock. And that one looks as anticipation of that bloom opening. No nectar for it there quite yet, but it's a really nice photo.
So go on the website and see what you can tick off. I'm going to give you a challenge, actually. I want to see a cinnabar moth. Now, that's on the medium list. Could be a tricky one.
No, hold on. The medium?
Yeah.
Well, they need ragwort. And all the ragwort I've seen at the moment, because of the late season, is only about up to here. So you're not going to get the cinnabar moths yet. That's really tough.
Look, I don't want excuses, I want results. So
Just
see
saying.
what you can do. We'll look out for them on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Now we've said the sun is shining here, you can see the blue sky behind us, and I'm very pleased to tell you that it's also blue sky up in Scotland in the Highlands where Yolo is. Yolo.
Yes, indeed, Michaela, it has been a glorious day up here. The sun's gone in now, but it has been absolutely stunning. And you've been introducing us to some of the nests you have down there. Well, I've got a Scottish nest to show you. This one was sent in by Kate Staziukovic. I hope I've got that right. A pair of great spotted woodpeckers in a park in the middle of Glasgow. The male politely waiting his turn before nipping in there. Look at that, to feed the youngsters. And up here we do have pairs, but they're a little bit later. None of them appear to be feeding young yet, so we think they're still on eggs here. And Gillian, well, she is over in Northern Ireland, of course, and she's been catching up with some of Castle Espy's smallest residents, their beautiful moths. All of that is to come later on, but for now, let's pop back down to Norfolk to Chris and Michaela.
Great to see Yolo in the sunshine instead of the rain in the Highlands. We'll be seeing more of him a bit later on. But let's cut right now to our live camera operator, Mark, who's out on the marshes. So let's see what he's getting for us tonight. Let's have a look. Can we see? There we go. You can see the marsh, and that's the freshwater marsh. And
It's got a lapwing out there.
Yeah, and a black-headed gull behind.
That's
This
nice.
really is a fabulous place for waders and for ducks as well. Every time you go out there, you're bound to see something. And because it's such a good place, we have, of course, got a Nest camera out there as well. This is it, and this is pointing towards a place that we've called Avocet Island. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious why we've called it Avocet Island, because it's got nesting avocets on it. 14 nests are there, and they've laid over a 2-week period. Many of them are sitting on 4 eggs, and the first hatched on Sunday. Now they're, again, precocial, so they'll leave the nest as soon as they've hatched, and they'll be wandering around for the next few days. You know what, they were really lucky to have them because they were extinct in the UK in the 19th century for about 100 years. And then in the 1940s, in World War II, avocets recolonised the beaches of East Anglia, which were closed and flooded as a defence against invasion. And since then, the habitat has been managed and numbers have really increased. In fact, the avocet is used, this gorgeous bird, as the emblem for the RSPB because it's been such an amazing conservation success story. Just shows what management can do. But look at this. I mean, these avocets can be a little bit aggressive, very territorial. That one's even having a go at a chick. Chick has obviously wandered into that avocet's territory. Here, though, it's been brilliant. I mean, numbers have gone up since they've managed from just a couple of pairs to 77 this year. But those chicks are extremely vulnerable to predation. I mean, we've seen gulls take them, we've seen foxes a couple of Springwatches ago, we even saw badgers take them. But they're also very vulnerable to human disturbance.
Yeah, they are. I mean, when foxes are taking them and badgers are taking them, that's part and parcel of the natural ecosystem. Predation is part of that. So it might not be pleasant, but it's how the world goes round. I think where things go wrong is where human disturbance has a negative impact. And I've got to say that when we finished our programme last night, we saw this down on the marshy area. It's not a human, it's a dog, but it's a dog that should have been, you know, in charge of, a human should have been in charge of that dog, and it's wandering across the marsh. Just listen to the degree of disturbance. All the birds have risen up off those nests, leaving those eggs to chill, potentially get wet, or be predated by other predators, but it doesn't even need another predator. The dog wanders to the other side, and look, its head goes down into an avocet's nest, and we think it was eating one of the eggs. I've got to say, we don't know whose dog this was. It doesn't have a collar, it's not a local animal, and this part of Wild Ken Hill is fenced. They're doing their duty to protect those avocets, but there are footpaths running there, and it's likely that the dog got in through one of those footpath entrances. Now, a recent study conducted by NFU Mutual showed that more people are walking their dogs in the countryside. 42% said they were taking more dog walks in the countryside. 64% of those people said they were running their dogs off the lead, and shockingly, of those 64%, 50% said that when they called their dog, it wouldn't come back. And 24% of those people surveyed said that their dogs regularly chased other animals. Now that simply isn't tolerable. It's certainly not tolerable where we've got ground nesting birds that are coming back from a period of recovery. So we really must ask you, if you are one of those people that are taking more regular walks into the countryside, please make sure that your dog is under control, or better still, at this time of year, in the places where those birds are, do keep them on a lead. Do you know how many dog walks there are a year in the UK countryside?
Oh, I'll take a thumbs up. I don't know, 60 million.
1.5 billion dog walks a year out there in the UK countryside. And a study that was done in New Zealand showed that when dogs are taken onto a nature reserve, even if they're on a lead, it can decrease the density of birds there by up to 40%. So, dog lovers, and I'm one of them, please let's try and act responsibly during the bird breeding season. And we've got a bit more about this coming up a bit later in the season as well.
We were horrified, weren't we, to see that dog, but the good news is we've looked at it now, that avocet, and we think that the eggs are still there. I mean, it looks like the bird's still brooding.
Well, there must be something there because it's gone down and it's incubating again. So fingers crossed that the dog only took one of those eggs.
Now, Chris, you are an amazing birder, but can you tell your tits apart? Can you tell one tit from another? Which one is a willow, which one is a marsh?
Well, that is one of the toughest jobs
Come on, you can do it.
in UK ornithology. These two species look very, very similar indeed. Now, if you see them side by side, they look very different. The willow tit can be a little bit more dumpy, it's a bit more shifty, so you can tell by the way they're moving. But just looking at them like this is quite hard. This one over here has got like a lot of white spot at the base of its bill. That's typical of marsh tits. This one over here, if it were the willow tit, well, it should have a sort of a plain white cheek. It really is tough telling them apart, particularly when they're flitting around in the trees. The way to tell them apart, though, is by listening to them. So first, let's hear the call of the marsh tit. It's got that explosive, quite loud, sneezing pichu, zizu, zizu, like that. Now let's hear the willow tit. Sounds angry. It's got that jur, jur, jur. And the key thing is that the marsh tit always produces that zizu. It's a two-note thing that it repeats, whereas the willow tit typically goes jur, jur, jur. It's a three-note thing or more. and they do sound very, very different. And that's really the only way that you can truly be safe separating these, unless they're side by side.
They certainly are very hard to tell apart, and the willow tit is hard to see, and it's getting harder, as Megan McCubbin found out.
I'm so excited. You know, even for the most experienced of birders, this is a species which is really hard to see, because currently the willow tit is the fastest declining resident bird we have in the UK.
Tragically, numbers have nosedived by 94% since the 1970s, and willow tits are now locally extinct in many of their former haunts, such as the southeast of England. But this endangered songbird has found a refuge. And it's in an unlikely place, the post-industrial landscapes of northern England.
Strongholds often exist on the edge of cities, just like this one here by the Wigan Flashes and Ambers Wood Nature Reserve. All this land was once used for mining and landfill, but as industrialisation decreased, rewilding took place, creating marshes and young woodland, perfect for willow tits.
The damp scrub of elder, willow and birch that's found here provides the perfect habitat for them to nest in.
Willow tits are highly unusual. That's because they essentially act like miniature woodpeckers. They're able to excavate their own nest holes. But as you might have noticed, it's a little bit loud. And of course, they're constantly singing to one another when they do this, giving notes to any competitors nearby of their location. So ultimately, this amazing life strategy plays a part in their downfall.
Here, like elsewhere in the UK, these unassuming little birds face serious challenges. So to understand the competition, ecologist Dr. Richard Broughton has been looking into their nests.
Here's a nice example of a willow tit nest, which a local collaborator, Wayne, he's been monitoring since it was being excavated by the birds. And it took them about a week, each of them, to dig this hole, and then another few days to build the nest. But it's no longer a willow tit nest. It was then taken over by blue tits. Using an endoscope like this, we can look inside these nests. This one's not active at the moment, but if we look inside, we can see this sort of footage. That's a female blue tit. It's incubating a nest, which was originally dug by willow tits.
Look at that.
Both blue and great tits nest in mature trees, but with numbers on the rise, more of them are spilling into younger habitats in search of nesting sites, knowing they can take full advantage of the willow tits' hard work. And there's more bad news. Numbers of their predators have also more than doubled in the last 50 years. Great spotted woodpeckers drill through the soft wood of the willow tits' nests to devour their chicks like grubs.
It's quite clear what's happened here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's bad news.
A bit of predation.
Yeah, so up until 2 days ago, this was a willow tit nest with 7 or 8 young.
So there's a bit of nesting material on the ground.
Yeah, this is interesting because you can see there's some moss in there. Willow tits won't use moss, but blue tits always use moss in their nest.
Ah.
So this tells a story that blue tits have tried to take over this willow tit nest, and the willow tits have won that battle. They've kept their nest, but then the predators have come and got them. They've dodged one bullet only to get hit by the next one.
I mean, it's devastating, isn't it? Because willow tit only produce one brood every single year. So an event like this is catastrophic. There's no other chance throughout the season.
Sometimes they can win. They can successfully defend their nests occasionally.
Really?
Yeah, we've got some footage of a male and a female great-spotted woodpecker who were attacking one of the nest boxes. And the willow tits put up a really ferocious fight. They were dive bombing them and hitting them in the head.
They were dive bombing?
Dive bombing the woodpeckers, yeah, making contact with them. It just wasn't worth the woodpeckers' trouble. They just went somewhere else.
I like that. They need a bit of a win.
They need all the help they can get.
They sure do.
Despite the many pressures they face, young, scrubby habitat like this is what the willow tits thrive in. And to help numbers recover across the country, Richard has worked out the surprising amount of space each small bird needs. 7 acres.
To get your head around that, you could fit half a dozen blue tit territories into an average willow tit territory. They've got very complex social hierarchies and individuals that have their rank within the organisation. And there's no point in having just a single territory, a single large territory. You need a population of territories to keep them going.
So ultimately then, it's a network, isn't it, throughout the course of the UK of willow tit territories. I mean, big scale rewilding, really.
Rewilding should be fantastic for willow tits because that's going to create the dynamic mosaics of shrub and woodland that they need.
Be fantastic, wouldn't it? I think, you know, rewilding large scale would do so much good for so many different species. Willow tits and everything else as well.
Rewilding ambassador.
I like that. Rewilding ambassadors, the face of it all, our little willow tits.
Feisty little birds, and then I've got some fantastic news for you because all 8 of the youngsters in that nest fledged successfully last Monday, which is brilliant news because it's a species that needs all the help it can get. Now, if I was to ask you, what is your favourite Scottish plant or mammal? Which one would you choose? I reckon the botanists amongst you would probably go for what, the thistle, or maybe Scots pine tree, bird watchers, I'm sure, golden eagle, and the mammal enthusiasts, maybe Scottish wildcat, or maybe the red squirrel. And you'd be right to choose the red squirrel because the bulk of the population is found up here in Scotland. But it wasn't always the case. They used to be common and widespread throughout the land. So what happened? Well, from the 1870s onwards, the grey squirrel was introduced from North America, and it brought with it the squirrel pox virus, which doesn't affect the greys, but it kills the reds. We used to have about 3.5 million red squirrel here in the UK. The population now is estimated to be somewhere between 120 and 160,000. And up here in the Highlands, there's an added issue, and that is the loss and the fragmentation of woodlands. Once the woodlands become isolated, the red squirrel populations become isolated and eventually die out. So the woodland planting work that's gone on here at Allerdale is going to help to tackle this. They planted, don't forget, nearly 1 million trees. Also, there's been a reintroduction up here. Allerdale and some of the surrounding landowners have got together with the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation to introduce red squirrels. The one worry they have is that a lot of the trees here are quite young at the moment and they're not producing enough seeds. And what do red squirrels eat? Well, a variety of food. We eat a lot of seeds, particularly from mature trees, fruits as well. They'll eat lichen, they'll eat shoots, they'll eat fungi. So what they're doing here is they're putting out supplementary food, and this is working really well. And we know because local cameraman Norman Strachan has been out and about photographing them. They feed them peanuts and hazelnuts, and this is just a booster. This is just to keep them going until the trees here are mature enough to produce seeds of their own. But that's not all red squirrels eat. They'll also nibble on red deer antlers. Plenty of those here, of course. Why? Well, 2 reasons. First of all, they need calcium, especially the lactating females. And also the squirrel is a rodent, and they have large incisors, large front teeth that grow continuously throughout their lives. So they have to nibble, they have to gnaw to keep those teeth down to a manageable size. Now, of course, with a huge project like this, it's not just red squirrels that benefit, other wildlife benefits too, and that includes pine marten. They caught this pine marten on one of the camera traps. Look carefully, you'll see it only has one eye. And it's done remarkably well to survive because they're very arboreal. It has to hunt for its food. And what's happened? Well, we suspect that what's happened is that it's had a territorial dispute with one of its neighbours and it's come off worst. Now, don't forget, those camera traps are running continuously right now. If anything unusual, anything exciting happens, well, we'll let you know straight away. Now, if you do ask me, what is my favourite seabird? Well, that'd be a difficult one to answer, but certainly one of them would be what the Shetlanders call the Teisty, or the black guillemot. And Gillian has been looking at these over in Northern Ireland.
Now here in Portaferry is a spot on the harbour wall where I'm told a really striking member of the auk family nests. So this is a great spot. Like, I've not really been here that long, and there's terns, there's St. Cormorant, there's some swallows, house martins, but what I'm really here for are black guillemots. And I've just been watching a pair. There's a pair that are obviously, well, it looks like they're establishing a nest in one of the cavities there in the harbour wall. They keep diving into the water, back up to their nest cavity. There's another one there that just seems to be sitting with its head out of the sea wall, just taking in the view, a little bit like a nosy neighbour almost. It's difficult to tell, well, actually impossible to tell the male and the female apart. This is their summer plumage, so they've got this beautiful sooty black plumage, almost exclusively except for the white panels on the wings. But what I really love about them are those feet, those crimson red feet. And it's thought that that plays a role in mating and mate choice. So the female may choose males with more vivid feet, red in their feet, because that would indicate a healthier male. And unlike the common guillemots, they're much rarer birds. There's a whole bunch of them out there now. I've been watching them heading out sort of about 20, 30 metres into the loch and diving down. Now there'll be plenty of crustaceans, but primarily fish, that's what they're after. And it's thought that one species in particular, butterfish, makes up the majority of the black guillemot diet. In a more natural setting, black guillemots would be nesting in sea cliffs, but a harbour wall pretty much provides them with the same sort of nesting cavity. It's a great place to avoid predators. The weather's been pretty shocking, but a few days ago we did have some sunshine and we sent one of our camera operators to film these very birds. And he was able to capture some courtship behaviour. Now, the birds are difficult to tell apart, the male and the female. There's a lot of manoeuvring around each other, but you can tell them apart at the point when the male will mount the female, and he uses those red legs to get a solid stance on her. It looks like he's massaging her almost, but that's where he gets a nice solid firm footing and is able to mate. And within a few days, maybe within up to a week of this, the female will lay her first egg, and then shortly after that, a second egg. Do you know, I can't tell you why I love these birds, I just do. I think part of it is because of the way they look. They're really striking with that absolutely jet black plumage and those white wing panels. Of course, those red legs really catch your eye as well. But the thing I think I love the most, I'm obsessed with the red inside their gates, inside their mouths. And you occasionally get a glimpse of that, and it is just so striking. I just think they're beautiful. That's it.
I've got to agree with Gillian. They're gorgeous birds, aren't they? I mean, they're neat, they're tidy with that flash of brazen red.
Inside their beak and then their feet, as if they're wearing Christian Louboutin shoes.
Oh, yeah, I've got a couple of those in my cupboard. I think you have too.
I've got yours.
Now, the last couple of days, we've really been singing the praises of Wild Ken Hill, particularly the way they manage it with all the different areas. But some areas are so brilliant because they don't manage them. They leave them alone, like the hedges and like this area here, which is unmarried scrubland, and that is full of wildlife.
Yeah, scrubs become a little bit controversial in the conservation world because in some places it's not wanted, particularly say on chalk downland where it grows over that short botanically rich turf. So there, scrub is cleared, and of course that's great for the orchids, it's great for the butterflies, it's great for all of the plants. But what about the warblers? It's a mosaic that we need, and here there's quite a lot of scrub developing at Wild Ken Hill. Great for blackcaps, great for whitethroats, and you never know, in the future it could be good for nightingales too. I say the future, there's already plenty of birds here to see, there's no doubt about that. And the other day I felt obliged to join in with a game that Michaela had come up with so that we could go out and see some birds, honestly.
Have you ever played bird bingo?
I've never played bingo.
You've never played bingo?
I've never played bingo. I've never played snooker. I've never played golf. I don't like these sorts of things.
Basically, we've got to spot some of these birds. As soon as we spot them, doesn't matter who spots them or hears them,
Right.
you cross them off. And
Right.
it's the first one that gets a line. So you can either have a line that way, or down, or diagonal. So, have you got it?
Yeah.
It quite amazes me that you've got to 60 and you've never played bingo.
I want to get to 160 and never play bingo.
Come on, we've got to go and look for some birds. Come on. Come on.
Of course, it's the worst time of day to go bird watching, mid-afternoon.
We're going to be all right. There's a pheasant, but have you got that on your card? No. Oh, that's not a great start, then, is it? What's that?
Marsh harrier?
Oh, I haven't got that either. Oh.
For goodness sake, who invented this game? The chiff-chaff's doing brilliantly. Pheasants calling, lots of things vocalising which aren't on my card.
Oh, I've got something, Chris. Up in the tree up there, wood pigeon.
What do you do?
You just cross it off. I just like that noted, that I got the first bird.
Yeah.
The first bird.
Yeah, okay. But I've got an idea.
OK.
You see, it's the middle of the afternoon, the sun's shining. Most of these sorts of birds are having a siesta. Why don't we go somewhere where birds are less likely to have a siesta? Let's go down to the marsh. Let's play marsh bird bingo.
Come on then, just remember I won this round.
What have you got on your card?
Oyster catcher, reed warbler, marsh harrier, mallard, lapwing.
I feel far more confident down
OK,
here.
I've already spotted an oyster catcher.
Have
Oyster catcher, yeah. Have you got that? Come on.
I've got lapwing as well. Is lapwing on the list?
Yeah. So I've got oyster catcher, lapwing. Oh, I only need the red shank.
Marsh harrier to the right over there.
Oh, what's that attacking it?
Lapwing. Oh, what a cracking view.
You see what fun this bingo is?
Hey, listen, I've been doing way too much birding and not enough bingo. I've just looked. I've got an oyster catcher, an avocet,
Yeah.
and a marsh harrier,
Yeah.
all in a line.
Oh, my goodness. You do that bingo. Yeah.
Bingo!
Bingo! It's good fun, isn't it? Come on, should we go and do it in the woodland now? It's a great way to get kids interested in birding. I think it's brilliant.
Just slipped a disc. I'll have to lie down for at least a week.
Admit it, come on, admit it. You quite enjoyed that. Little bit? You did. It's
Listen,
great.
I was lying. I had played bingo once before. And I'd also played golf and snooker. I was just hoping never to have to do it again, that's all.
No, but it's a great thing to do. And as I say, great thing to do with your kids. Get a bingo of birds, bird bingo, get them to go out and look for the birds. But our kids loved a bit of competition, don't
Okay,
they? But
but
anyway, I mean, we did that for a bit of fun. But look at this map. This just shows the variety of birds that we're seeing on Wild Ken Hill in the agricultural area, the conservation area, the rewilding area. I mean, look, there's just so many of them,
There
isn't
is
there?
so many. And in fact, when we were down on the marsh there, we'd finished playing the infamous bird bingo, and we spotted another species that was on one of those cards. I'm very pleased to be able to put that on there now. I love sticking a bird on a map. There we are, spoonbill. And here is that one of those spoonbills that we've spotted down on the marsh. Really characteristic flight profile there with the extended neck and that bizarre bill sticking out. To easily tell them apart from things like little egret, which fold their neck up when they're flying. Here it comes into land, and you can see that spatulate bill. I love the spoonbill, very eccentric looking bird. So why don't we go down to the marsh? We've got our camera down there, might have a spoonbill there at the moment. Let's see what we've got with our camera operator, Mark Yates, down there at the moment. There's masses of midges.
Look at that.
Look at that, beautiful.
What
See,
a-
the little things can, you know, mean most of all.
Well, the swallow will be out tonight, enjoying those.
Yeah, yeah.
That'll be, as you say, a bonanza. Anyway, look at this area. The regenerative agricultural area has so many birds, which is really good news. And I'm going to add another one, which is the linnet. Very lucky to have the linnet here. It's another one of those farmland birds whose numbers have declined 56% since 1970s. And that's partly due to changing agricultural practices, pesticide use, lack of hedgerows, and lack of seed and nesting areas. But here, sources of seeds are boosted by the margins, by the scrubland that's behind us, by the hedges that can also provide them with nesting areas. But the good news is numbers have gone up by 6% of linnets in the last 10 years, which means that they're stabilising a little bit. And it's probably thanks to places like this that are managing it for farmland birds, which
really
is
good news. Fantastic stuff. I've got to say, it's all been a bit birdy tonight, hasn't it? A bit birdy. Time for some mammals, perhaps. And we've been watching the brown hares here at Wild Ken Hill. There are loads of hares here. It's absolutely fantastic. But we're going to show you another species of hare now that lives on an island off the coast of Northern Ireland. Not only another species, but it's an animal that comes in a very peculiar, spectacular form.
On the Causeway coast of Northern Ireland, where the land was forged by giants. Stories are told of an island torn from the rolling hills and cast into the sea. Rathlin Island is steeped in ancient superstition. And even today, there are whisperings of Mother Nature's mysterious powers. Spring arrives here on a warm wind. The sea stacks fill with a cacophony of calls. And the bays bustle with life. Many seem preoccupied with courtship. Up on the cliff tops, umber eyes watch these elaborate displays. The Irish hare waits patiently to join the spring spectacle. It prefers to show off under the cloak of twilight. These elusive creatures are unique to Ireland. And their secretive nature earned them a reputation in Irish folklore. Hares were said to be shapeshifters, able to take on a human form. But tales of the mythical may still come to light. During spring, the breeding season is at its peak. Gathering males have caught the scent of a female. She's quickly surrounded by suitors. But amorous advances are rarely welcomed while trying to eat. However, the attention can be hard to shake. Sometimes a firm hand is needed. Perhaps this female is hoping for something more. A suitor draped in far greater finery. Gold. Rathlin is famed for its golden hairs. These precious jewels are extremely rare. This is thought to be the only one currently on the island. Hares with shimmering coats and sapphire eyes appeared here decades ago. And their regal lineage is still visible. But this golden hare will have to wait for another chance to pass its splendor to the next generation. Because as the sun climbs, the females scatter. And he melts back into the undergrowth, and the island once again conceals its precious secrets.
Do you know what? I was trying to remember how long it is since I've been to Rathlin Island, and I'm ashamed to say it's nearly 30 years. And having seen that film, I must get back there soon. Now, one bird we see quite often here, especially flying overhead, going up the valley behind me, is the heron, or the grey heron. And they're probably going up the Allerdale River in search of, this time of year, not so much fish, but I suspect frogs, newts, maybe a few lizards and mice and voles as well. And I like a heron. There's something prehistoric about them. But one of our researchers here, Jack Richardson, he loves herons. So much so that earlier this year he spent 2 months at his local heronry on the outskirts of Bristol. This is the River Avon, and the heronry is in the tall trees on the right there. And some of these heronries date back hundreds of years, some even as far back as the Doomsday Book. They're early nesters, 23rd of March, and you can see some are incubating eggs, some already have young, even at this time of year. Now, they lay between 2 and 7 eggs usually, then those chicks are in the nest for almost another 2 months. And the young grow very quickly on a diet of fish and eels and amphibians and reptiles. This is the nest that Jack concentrated on. And in March, she was still incubating eggs. But by the 15th of April, when she gets up, she reveals that underneath, she's got 2 young chicks. And note that when adult herons come back to the nest, there's a greeting, but they always land on a branch nearby and then walk onto the nest, the male taking over from the female here. And the reason they do that, of course, is they don't want to land on the nest and trample the precious eggs or those precious chicks. At this age, they look like punk rockers. Those chicks are probably, what, about a week and a half old at this point. See the beautiful beaks in full breeding plumage there, the adult. They are stunning birds, quite stunning birds, with that long, long beak there. See how cold it is. You can see its breath. Of course, we had a very cold end of March and early April. And when they're not feeding, they loaf around on the branches. But they're very good parents, very, very attentive parents, nibbling the beaks there. And then when it gets cold, when it gets wet, they'll nestle down and look after those chicks. Now, Jack wasn't able to get back for another 2 weeks. When he did, everything had changed. You see, the chicks have grown. They're now about 3.5 to 4 weeks old, stretching their wings, just exercising. See the end of the feathers there, in pin, as they say. So they've got this sheath protecting them and covering them there. But they're starting to look more like adult herons. They're starting to walk around that nest. It's a big old typical heron, big old stick nest there. Very noisy, very smelly. 2 weeks again. They're now about 6.5 weeks old, and they're looking like adult herons. Standing on one leg, they're starting to lose that punky tuft. And at this point, they're very demanding, extremely noisy. But that rich diet, of course, growing constantly. When the adult arrives, they pull at the beak. And that is an incentive for the adult to regurgitate the fish. And you watch the throat here. You can see the fish starting to move up in that throat. And soon after, I'm pretty sure, the chicks would have had a beak full of fish. Sometimes a stray adult wanders onto the nest, and the parents are very protective, jumping up and chasing it away. They're in no danger at this stage. If they were younger, then they would be. Herons will eat anything and everything. I've seen them eating more hens, seen them eating water eel even. But at this point, they're safe enough. And then it rained. It rained and rained and rained and rained. But the herons are old enough to withstand that. And actually, I've got some great news for you, because we learnt today that those 2 herons fledged that nest successfully, and the whole heronry there has had a very successful year. And you might think it's unusual to have a heronry right on the edge of Bristol. Well, we've actually got heronries in the middle of some of our biggest cities here in the UK. Glasgow's got one, London has got several, including one at Regent's Park, where they put up baskets for the herons to nest in. Can you imagine that? You're wandering around Regent's Park looking at the ground, you look up, all of a sudden there's a huge basket there. You're thinking, what on earth is that? All of a sudden a heron lands, a heron nest. They are truly fantastic birds, herons. They really are. Now, one of the things I'm looking forward to doing when I leave here, now that it's quite a bit warmer, is dusting off my moth trap and putting it out. I should be catching some really cool moths at this time of year. And over in Northern Ireland, that's exactly what Gillian's been doing.
Castle Espy has a whole host of habitats that are home to a surprising number of species, some of which we've already met, but some prefer to come out in the cover of nightfall. So why am I out in broad daylight? Well, Ross McElrath is one of the wardens here, and he loves to survey some of the smaller nocturnal creatures using a moth trap. And this morning, we're going to find out what he's discovered. Hi, Ross.
Hi there.
We've definitely picked a great day for this, haven't we?
It's a glorious day.
Yay! Wow, so look at this. This is a moth trap. You've been doing this a long time over here at Castle Espy. Tell me, what's the attraction for you?
I think moths are just a really, really fantastic group of animals, and it's their diversity that fascinates me the most.
Yeah.
In the UK, there's around 70 species of butterfly, but there's actually 2,500 different species of moths. And they come in all different shapes and sizes and colours, and they play a really, really important role in our natural ecosystems. They're a really good food source for a lot of our breeding birds, but they're also really vital pollinators too.
So what species is this?
This is called a nut tree tussock. And they're called this because they're associated with nut trees, hazel trees.
That pattern is beautiful. It's rich, like tapestry, isn't it?
It is, yes. They have beautiful feathered antennae which will pick up the pheromones of the opposite sex so they can go and find a mate to reproduce. And they've got beautiful, fluffy, furry bodies which keeps them warm in cold nights as well.
So what species is this?
This species is called an early thorn because it emerges earlier in the year. It's more adapted to cold conditions, so it might fly away on your hand there now.
This one's behaving though, look.
It certainly
taking a
likes
shine to me. But it is a beauty, isn't it?
You can see right away the cryptic camouflage. It looks just like a leaf. And this just shows the diversity of moths. We have the nut tree tussock, which is really robust and furry. And then we have the early thorn, which is very delicate.
Okay, you know what? I'm getting into this now.
This moth is new for sight as of this week, the white pinion spotted moth. We found it for the first time in recent years, which is really exciting.
What does that tell us about, you know, what's going on at this site?
Well, moths are quite specific to certain habitats. So the diversity of moths shows that we have a really robust ecosystem here, but also shows we've got so many different habitats, and our moth assemblage is starting to show that now too.
Exquisite is the word that comes to mind.
It is gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah. And this is actually quite a special moth here for Northern Ireland because it's only found in County Down, so we're quite lucky to get it here indeed.
It's actually quite hypnotising.
Yeah.
Doing this. Ooh, and off it goes.
And there we go.
Now this actually, thought there was nothing in here. It looked like a little speck of dirt, but this is also a moth.
It is indeed.
It's tiny.
This species is a wonderful micromoth called Psychoides filicavora. It's actually a relatively a new moth to the UK. It was thought to have come over in garden plants from Asia.
I'm guessing a lot of people won't even have heard of micromoths.
They're one of my favourite groups. If you really get in and look closely, they're actually beautiful. One of my favourite micromoths is called Hesperia sulphurella. It's named after its beautiful sulphur palps, which are basically its mouth. It's one that we find here at Castle Espy.
So each species almost can tell a story about the changing habitat here, right?
Moth abundance has declined hugely in the last 50 years, and that's probably to do with our change of land use and massive habitat loss. But actually, the moth diversity is on the increase because moths are now moving from Europe further up into the UK. And even here at Castle Espy, over the last 3-4 years, we have 2 new species which have probably come because of the warming climate. We're actually approaching 400 species for this site. We're so close, we're nearly there, I'm so excited.
Do you know, I would love it if we hit 400 while we're here. You got to keep me informed, okay?
Oh, well, we're so close, we're so close. Maybe by the end of your time here, we'll hopefully have 400 and we'll have a celebration together.
Love it. You're on. Well, Russ, thank you so much. I've had an amazing time. I'm going to brave the rain again.
You're welcome. See you again soon.
You know, moth trapping is like opening a box of chocolates, isn't it? You never know what you're gonna get. And that was a cultural reference to the Forrest Gump film with Tom Hanks. Did you see it?
No, I'm more Partridge than Gump, if I'm really honest with you.
It was really good. It was
More
a
Partridge
fabulous
Gump.
film.
I'll tell you one thing, though. You know the cinnabar moths?
Yeah.
People have been posting pictures. They're out already. Apparently they
Brilliant.
emerge from their pupae in mid-May and they're on the wing till August, so top spotting for those people finding those cinnabar moths. Tell you what, it's just about time to have another look at our live nest. Let's have a look at what we've got on offer at the moment. And these will be constantly changing. Got buzzard at the top there, looking pretty good. Swallow, of course, well, we've done that. Can't go back there, I suppose. Avocet, look at the view of the avocet, it's pretty good.
Yeah, but I think we should check up on our kestrel nest. Let's have a look at that live because the female laid 5 eggs. 3 of them have hatched. 2 of them are left. Now, she lays them in two days apart, sometimes up to 4 days apart. So they are going to hatch sort of 2 days apart, but who knows? We don't know whether those other 2 eggs are going to hatch at all. But look at this. Both parents are bringing in a lot of prey. And if you look closely, you can see that that's a vole. Now, this is quite surprising for us because we haven't seen many barn owls nesting, and we presumed that was because vole numbers were down in this area. But as I say, when you look at what those kestrels are feeding their chicks on, there are quite a few voles on the menu. Brings it in, rips bits off. I mean, sometimes the bits it rips off seem a little too large to feed the chicks. You can clearly see those 2 eggs there, though, can't you?
Okay.
Who knows whether they're going to hatch?
Well, we've been keeping quite a close eye on what the kestrels have been bringing into that nest, and I'm pleased to present our first statistical representation in the form of this pie diagram here. So what have we got? Okay, well, we've got 3 birds that we've seen brought in so far, a couple of shrews, just 4 mice, and as you can see, the vast majority of the food that we've seen presented to those chicks are voles in the form of short-tailed field voles in the main. What a beautiful diagram that is. If I was at home age 8, I'd be lusting after this to pin it up on my wall. I had one of these pinned on my wall until I got to Debbie Harry, aged 16. The pie diagram had to make way for the pop superstar.
Do you know, if I had that pie diagram, I'd give it to you to put on your wall. You're welcome to it. Time for a mindful moment. And what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you're on a walk on the beach, breathing in the sea, and then you paddle into the water and you go for a cold water swim. So take yourself there as we go to the Cornish coast. I'll tell you what, thanks to Josh Tarr taking me right into the water there, I'm a bit chilly now after my cold water swim.
I think it's simply the sun's gone down, if I'm very honest with you.
Have you ever done it, cold water swimming?
Of course not.
No, it's great. People are really loving it. Lots of people doing it. Do you know, we're nearly at the end of the show, but I'm going to tease you with another new nest that we haven't introduced you to yet. And it's this one. I know it's been very popular on our live cameras on the website. It is the nest of a pied wagtail. And it's in a stone wall of a barn.
It's asleep.
And it's sitting on 5 eggs. Oh, look at that. Do you know, I was almost worried there for a minute because I thought, my goodness, I hope it is asleep. And I can see it's breathing. So I'm very pleased to say that it is. And there we go, there's a pied wagtail coming. I think why people enjoy it so much is because even when it sits on the nest, that tail wags, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? It's tucked up in one of our barns. Hidden up underneath the eaves, quite secure. These are birds that are parasitised by cuckoos. No, I don't think this one's going to be. It's very well hidden up underneath the eaves there, but they're a striking bird, the pied wagtail, really popular. Find them all across the UK. And of course, very much a bird you'll find in urban areas as well. Even in the wintertime when we have that, you know, cities being hotter than the countryside, they'll flock in there. But that's a lovely sight. One of my favourite birds, actually, the pied wag. Black and white, quite simple.
It's all the black and white birds that you love,
I'm a
isn't
black
it?
and white bird person, yeah. I'm avocet, pied wagtail and smew. They're in my top 5 birds.
It's very popular with people watching them on the website as well.
Indeed they are. Well, very sadly, that's all we've got time for today. What's coming up tomorrow? Well, I had the extraordinary privilege of going out and spending some time with one of Britain's most enigmatic birds, the one and only stone curlew.
I'm going to be looking at the Scottish Wildcat project up here at Allerdale.
And Gillian will be catching up with Betty, the black-headed gull. And she's got some exciting news to reveal, so we'll look forward to that. That's brought us to the end of tonight's show. We'll be back tomorrow. As I say, make sure you keep your eyes on those live cameras because there are quite a lot of birds sitting on eggs that once they hatch, they're precocial, as I've told you, and they will be gone. So you might see it before we do. So as I say, we'll be back tomorrow. We love reading all your comments on Twitter and all the social media channels, and on Instagram tomorrow. Gillian will be talking to Hannah Stipful at 1 o'clock, so make sure you join us for that. Enjoy the sunshine. Let's hope it's there tomorrow for us. Bye-bye.